Oh, gotcha. Okay. Okay, so there's none. So the total in seats isn't in on this. Gotcha.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 25th meeting of the Ames Community School District Board of Directors. I will call the meeting to order and entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move approval of the agenda as presented.
Second. Moved by Franzen, seconded by Colton. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Director Bankin, will you please read our purpose statement?
The Ames Community School District commits to equity and access that empowers every individual to reach their full personal and educational potential.
Thank you. Then our first item on the agenda this evening is our COVID-19 update, and I will turn it over to Dr. Kathy Arnold.
Good evening, board. I'll start on our first slide with our Story County data. Story County is continuing to be at a high level of community spread with 137.98 total new cases per 100,000 persons in the past 7 days, which actually is about a 100 case decrease from our report 2 weeks ago, which is great news. Our 7-day positivity is 10.15, and additionally, as of the last IDPH report, 16% of the new cases in Story County are in those 0 to 17 years of age, which is a decrease in percentage from what we saw from the previous report. As far as vaccinations in Story County, we've seen about a 0.5% increase again in vaccination percentages over the past 2 weeks. Currently, 56.7% of Story County residents are fully vaccinated, and an additional 3.6% are partially vaccinated. Of the population eligible for vaccination, those 12 and up, 63.7% are fully vaccinated, and an additional 4% are partially vaccinated. The next slide includes our student and staff data. At the time the report was prepared this morning, we had 4 students and 0 staff members who are currently positive for COVID-19. We've had a total of 101 students positive and 23 staff positive since the beginning of the school year. And again, in the breakdown of the data, 62% of the positive cases in students are in that PK elementary, and 72% are in those PK through 6th grades. So if you throw the 6th graders into that group as well. Mm-hmm. This trend in positives continues with our staff, where 70% of our staff who were positive are in that PK through elementary area, and 70% of the positives also have been breakthrough cases in fully vaccinated staff. We have seen a decrease in the reported number of students positive since the implementation of the mask mandate. And the next slide shows, I did an overlay of the breakdown of the total number of students and staff positives per day. So the students are the blue line and the staff are the red line, and then overlaid our Story County case rate on top of that. I also noted on the bottom of the graph the date masks were required, and also 14 days after masks were implemented, which is that COVID incubation period. And the highest point for our students positives this year was a total of 31 on September 18th. And today, like I said, we're down to 4. Last year, our maximum amount of students at any time was 23. And again, this is what is reported to us. And so that's the only access to data that we have. And then on the final slide, you'll see some COVID-related vaccine updates. The FDA is meeting tomorrow to discuss approving Pfizer's pediatric COVID vaccine. Pending this anticipated approval, the CDC is scheduled to meet early next week for the final approval. What we know right now is that the vaccine is a 3rd dose of the 12+ dose, and it's its own formulation. And why that's important is it means you can't just use what we have on hand in the county for the 12+ vaccine for that younger population. I did receive a call from public health, and While initially we weren't going to offer a clinic, it looks like we've been asked if that would be something we'd be available to do. So right now we're in the planning stages of offering a pediatric clinic for those 5 to 11. It would only be that age group again because of the different vaccine products that are used. And in early November, we're still working out the details though. With that, approval date in early November, and then people able to get their vaccinations 5 weeks from the first injection is when you're considered fully vaccinated. So, we could probably estimate that majority of the families with children in that age group would be able to have them fully vaccinated by the end of December, based on supply and all the things. And just finally, a report on what we've done for booster clinics. We held clinics on the 1st and the 22nd and had 271 staff receive a booster shot. We don't plan to offer any additional booster shot clinics. We haven't seen the need for that, but I've been handling on a one-by-one case basis, trying to get staff who are still interested in connected to appointments for that. So that completes my report. Please let me know what questions I can answer.
Well, it sounds like you got asked because you've been doing such a good job. So just keep at it. Quick question. The flu, with the flu and COVID, what is the amount of time that you should wait for a booster or your first if you're a child?
Right, so the flu shot, CDC actually says you can give them at the same appointment. We did our staff flu shots the week of like the 11th and the following 2 days of the next week. So, but you can actually give them at the same time. There isn't a time period waiting with those vaccines anymore.
Okay, great, thank you.
Dr. Arnold, I'm curious if you do have a family that comes in for the pediatric shot, but have people in the older age group who would like it, could they get it at the same time as well? For the older?
For the older, well, I'll have to talk to public health and just see how because we want to make sure that we're going to set up a system not to have any errors or risks with that. So on the minimum, we would get them a direct appointment at that point, and if we weren't able to actually offer it here.
That's great, thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Arnold. And do we have any comments from the public on our COVID-19 update?
Hello.
Hello.
Chris Kasak, 5616 Maryland Street. And as everyone knows, I oppose masking for kids. I think that at one point it was necessary and it was a good idea. I don't anymore. Over 5 million kids have been diagnosed with COVID-19, and that's just what we know about. There's probably a lot of asymptomatic kids that also have had it, but were not diagnosed because nobody ever knew. And out of those, less than 700 have died or have very serious complications. And out of those 700, less than 20 had no pre-existing conditions. Science shows that kids are at a very minuscule risk from masking. We know this, we have the data on that, at least the baseline data. What we still don't know is we don't know how mentally or physically this affects kids, masking, especially long-term. I think that, in my opinion, it's kind of irresponsible to not look at all the facts and kind of weigh it and take it day by day. COVID's not going anywhere. There is going to be no zero COVID. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but that's what I've heard from the doctors. And it's just going to keep fluctuating. Most likely when people go inside due to hot or cold weather, it's going to go up, and will come down, go up, come down. You can still pass it with the vaccine. You can still pass it with masks. The only random cluster sample that's been done was the Bangladesh study. It showed that cloth masks were generally ineffective. Surgical masks were somewhat effective. And most kids wear cloth masks. They don't wear it correctly. They're spitting all over it. That was 3 layers of cloth versus the mostly 1 layer of cloth that these kids wear. And I just wanted to tell you guys that I still oppose it this week too. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Any other comments from the public on our COVID-19 update? And I don't see any hands raised, so I will go ahead and move on to our discussion items. And first we have our board committee update, and we will start with the policy committee.
Minutes are there and all of them are under the next agenda item policies for discussion. So we'll wait until then.
Thank you. And audit and budget. So we have Chris is gonna give our update. I was just waiting for someone to give me permission. Yeah. So Eric, if you could pull up the document. So, October 1st is our head count for certified enrollment. We certify that no later than, October 15th. In between October 15th and November 1st, the state is working out conflicts with other school districts. So the numbers I give you may change slightly. It is possible that they're not completely final because there might be conflicts between other school districts. But I want to give you basically where we are. So that's not the document I sent, I don't believe. Okay, I'm so sorry. This is not the correct document. So hopefully, I don't know, can we put it up on the document camera? Or I can send it to you. Is it the next document? What's the next one, Eric?
No, the next page.
The next page I'm
Yeah,
in.
it is. It's a change of authority.
Oh, those aren't even the right order. Okay. Okay. Give me just a minute. Okay, Eric, if you could bring up the one I just sent you, that'd be great. What was on there was the very first page of certified enrollment that showed when we certified it on to the 10/15. But what I needed to show our head as the document is the summary comparison. So when we pull this document up, I want to explain a little bit about how certified enrollment works, how it's different from what we would think of pupils in seats or students in seats. We're talking about what we're counting for funding. So on line 1, he'll get that up pretty quick, I think.
Chris, could this be something you could email to us as well?
Sure.
Okay. So we're not looking at what's in the agenda?
Well, just
don't look
that
at
first page,
Just,
yeah.
okay,
The rest of it was okay.
okay.
There we go. All right, so line 1 are resident students who are attending our school district. So our resident students that are attending our school district went up just under 121 students. Line 2 are resident students that we count and get funding for that are attending other school districts. So in this case, the number of students that are open enrolling out to other districts went up 13 students. We have a little bit of weighting in there for non-public shared time and dual enrolled, but we get down to what is actual enrollment on line 7. So our actual enrollment went up 136.7 or just under 137. That's adding all those together. However, those 13 students that we went up on line 2, we're going to get that funding from the state. It's in the formula, but then we have to turn around and write checks to other school districts for those students. So we don't get to keep that money. On the line just below actual enrollment are the non-resident public students that are attending our district. So these are students that are open enrolled into us, and we had 49 less students open enroll into us than last year. So if you skip the preschool line, which I don't understand why they place it there, it has nothing to do with any of the totals, but that's the preschool enrollment. And you go down to total school age students that we're providing programs and services to. And so that is the net of the 136 minus the 49. So the number of students that we are serving went up just under 75 students. Does that all make sense? Monique's shaking her head no.
So I just want to I'm trying to clarify this. 4 years in and open enrollment still confuses me. So in the line, it doesn't have a number, but it's the minus 49 change, right?
Yes.
So those are students who are open enrolling in.
They were.
And so then I'm trying to figure out what happened to those students. They either decided to go to their home district or some other district, but they're somewhere else, but they weren't
right. So
here anyway.
So they can return to their resident school district at any time. They can end their open enrollment and go back to their resident student. It also is possible that before the March 1st deadline, they chose to open enroll to a different school district, not their resident school district. So I can't tell you what makes up that, but one way or the other, they're no longer going to be attending the Ames school district.
Okay, thank you.
So the main thing to keep in mind is if you're thinking about funding for fiscal year 23, we're going to receive funding equivalent to 75 additional students. Okay, Eric, I think you need, yeah. Whoops. Okay. So I've put together preliminarily what that means for funding. I do want to talk just very slightly, it's really complicated, but I want to talk just briefly about some of the changes the state made. They made some changes to the foundation formula that is eliminating a tax credit they've been providing state aid, and they've rolled it into the foundation formula by increasing the foundation level. However, by the way they're doing it, it's going to actually cost them more money because the school districts that don't have as much industrial and commercial replacement are going to get more in state aid. We're going to get less in state aid, but we'll still get the same amount of dollars. We don't lose any dollars. But it's going to cost the state more to fund it the way they are than the way they've been funding it. So the reason I note this is that means that there's less funding available for next year from the state level because they're already putting in an increased amount of state aid into the formula. In addition, if you notice for fiscal year 22, we got 2.3% state percentage of growth. One of the ways they funded that was because of COVID, there were 6,000 less students statewide in Iowa last year. For many, many reasons. Some of them went to homeschool, some of them went to independent private instruction, some went to non-public schools. But in total, there were 6,000 less kids that the state had to fund. That gave them excess funds that they then used to pay for that 2.3% state percentage of growth. Those kids are now, as you can see, are coming back and they're going to have to fund those kids. So what we're hearing from IASB is that not to expect more than 1%, and that would be the state percentage of growth, and that would be at the very high level. So they're thinking somewhere between 0.5% and 1%. Now, I hope that's not true. I hope the state magically finds some more money and is able to give us more, but that's where we know what we know at this point. So again, you can see that based on our enrollment increase of 137 resident students, our new regular program dollars go up $996,000. Now I want to talk a little bit about the budget guarantee. If you remember last year when our enrollment went down, there is a mechanism within the state foundation formula that says every school district is going to be guaranteed at least 101% of their prior year regular program dollars. You have to levy property taxes to do it, but it's a way to kind of ease those one-time cuts or having those cuts all in 1 year.
So the budget guarantee did exactly what it said. It says, okay, we're going to let you levy $317,000 of property taxes to get that 101% and hope that next year you'll recover that. It's exactly what happened. We levied it, and in fiscal year 23, we'll recover that. However, because of that, that's got to come off of that $995,000 because we didn't make those cuts because we levied one-time property taxes for that. So that brings our net new revenue down to $678,000. And then now the one good thing about open enrollment is that open enrollment, we pay other districts or other districts pay us based on the prior year cost per student. So when we write a check to other school districts for fiscal year 23, no matter what, we will be paying them $7,287 per student. So no matter what happens with state percentage of growth, that doesn't change. The same with the open enrolled in, we're going to get that amount. So between 13 more students open enrolling out and 49 less opening enrolling in, that's a loss of revenue of $452,000. And the reason I stated that, what that's based on is that number will not change, that $425,000, unless the number of students change because the state finds some conflict that changes those numbers. But the amount won't change per student. That leaves us with $226,000 of new money. So the reason I wanted to make sure that you had a chance to look at this is that normally when you hear, oh, our enrollment went up 137 students, it's going to be a really good budget year. That would be my first thought. But what you have to look at all the intricacies of the formula and how that trickles down. Eric, if you could go back to the other.
On that one, Chris, I have one question.
Okay.
So that's making the conservative estimate, though, that there will be no
Right.
change in the form.
So Eric, if
it'll
you could
probably
go
be
back
higher.
up to the one we were just on. No, the page 2 of this. So yes, if we get 0.5% state percentage of growth, that goes up to about 340,000. If we get 1%, it goes up to like 570,000. So not, I mean, yes, that's going to be welcomed, but it's not going to be a huge increase in that. Our increased costs each year just for employee costs are usually between $800,000 and $900,000. That gives you a benchmark of where we are.
Chris, can
Yes.
I just get some clarity? You lost me between an increase in 75 students to an increase in 137 students. I got
Okay,
confused.
so go back to the other page, Eric. So on line 7, actual enrollment, we're going to get new money for 137 students, but we don't get to keep money for 13 of those because they're open and rolling out. We'll write checks to other school districts for that. Then we have 49 less students that other districts are going to write us checks for. So this year they're writing us checks for 49 students that next year that we won't get. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay. Eric, if you could go back to the attachment that's on the board agenda, and it's the enrollment history page. There you go. So I just wanted to, our enrollment's kind of done some up and downs with COVID, and it hasn't been real predictable. That's the case all over the state. I mean, that is not unique to Ames. But I want to kind of put it in perspective that our enrollment in Ames has always been kind of topsy-turvy. We had a few years, the last few years, we've had some growth, and we've had some in resident students, and we've had some growth in open enrolled, but that wasn't always the case. Sometimes our resident students went down. We've been as low as 38 net open enrolled in the history that I've got here. So I just wanted to show that in case everybody thinks there's something just unique about these 2 years, that what's unique is COVID. but it's always been kind of topsy-turvy in Ames with regards to enrollment. I will tell you that if you look in like fiscal year 14, 15, 16, open enrollment was really our lifeblood. So, last year we had some conversations because our resident enrollment was going up that maybe we needed to close open enrollment, and that's always a hard conversation to have. But open enrollment for Ames has kind of held us together the last 10 years or so. So I don't know what else to say on this page. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions on it. Did I cover everything, Elisa, Jamette, from the Budget and Audit Committee?
Yeah, yes, and this is exactly what we don't do it because this is very, very complex. But the thought that when at the committee, that was my first thought about enrollment, and I think it's a good lesson. And since the board changes, right, it would be nice to keep that historical data in mind, that at times you're gonna feel like, oh, we're good, but things like this happen. So that was very interesting. And second, I appreciated the staff bringing this early on so we can look at it. And these are early stages of the budget, but I really appreciate how early you have brought it to our attention.
And I apologize for the mix-up on the handouts. That's what I get when trying to get it done really quickly before I have to get on a DE webinar about maintenance of equity, which is a whole nother thing. I will make sure that the correct documents get to JD so he can get them loaded onto the agenda.
Thank you.
So Chris, I'm sorry, I am so sorry. I just want to be absolutely clear then, because I've been getting a lot of questions about enrollment and I want to be sure I'm not misstating. So if someone says, hey, Monique, how's that enrollment going? Do I tell them we're up by 75 students or we're up by 137 students? What is the accurate thing to tell someone?
In my opinion, we're up by 75 because that's what our funding is.
So if somebody says, hey, Monique, how's enrollment going? I say, hey, we're up by 75 students this year. Is that
I think that's
accurate
fair.
answer?
Yes.
Thank you. That's helpful.
And Monique, I appreciate that because we laughed about it because we ran into this when we were educating the community on the high school bond referendum. And it is, to be clear to everyone, your certified enrollment is different than, I think you said it's noses. Students and seats, I say noses, but yes. So it is, we are up 75 noses because students and seats. And so the certified enrollment is a little tricky to look at.
We're up
those,
75 FTE students. These are not noses and seats. These are certified enrollments.
Well,
So that's, otherwise, I mean, it's hard to, if you don't say that, because there's no way you can have 120.9 students.
Because it could be, so then it's technically more than 75 people,
Yes.
yeah.
right? So it's more than 75 people, but because of the,
Right, so for instance, the homeschool assistance program, they're weighted at 0.3. But yeah, we don't have half students. I mean, so
Thank you.
these are FTEs for funding. They're not students necessarily in seats.
Sure, but for the general public and understanding that, since they don't understand why we have these decimals when we're talking about people, so.
So the good news is we have more students coming into the district and we have more students that count per revenue. The caution, of course, is, and I love having a fiscally conservative business manager, is it doesn't necessarily translate to income that you might just off the top of your head expect.
right.
All right, thank you for that update. And do we have any other comments or questions from the board or updates on committees? All right, and comments from the public on the board committee updates? Go right ahead.
Amy Erica Smith, 603 Northwestern Avenue. I just have a clarification question. I wish I could raise my hand in the back. So we have open enrollment taken out of the budget, but there's no line item for open enrollment in. in the simplified budget that you presented. So where does open enrollment into the district go, or is that already, I mean, so we're giving money to other people for students who are open enrolling out of the district, or to other districts for students who are open enrolling out. But I'm wondering where the line item is for open enrollment in.
Amy, Erica, we will follow up with you because
Okay.
we don't answer questions during the
Oh,
public
I'm sorry.
comments. So we will follow up
Okay,
with the answer to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Any other comments from the public on the board committee updates? All right, seeing none, we will move on to our policies for discussion.
Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, okay.
Well, because these are,
Right.
these were all ones that Chris brought to the policy committee, and some are specific, so.
Right, so for the most part, the policies are simply taking either the ISB policy and putting it in the new format that Paula has provided us to put the policies in, that purpose statement, the scope, and the accountability. A couple of the nutrition ones are very specific to federal law. So we retain the ones that have been reviewed by our legal counsel and that I have to file with the Department of Education Nutrition Bureau every year when I do the applications for school lunch. So it's just, for those, they may not be exactly the ISB, but they've been vetted by both DE and legal counsel, and they're in the new format. 705.4, we can pull that one up. This is actually a new policy that has been recommended based on some interpretations of the Iowa Constitution on what constitutes a public purpose. So this was a new policy that has been recommended within the last couple of years. So we are implementing IASB's policy with the format as we've stated that we're changing to. And it just basically, says that we have to acknowledge and recognize and be very cognizant of, when we spend public funds, that there is a public purpose that matches the intent of the Iowa Constitution. I don't know that there's a whole lot more on that. I know that the big one that's always going around the state is about food. And so we have very specific policies on when food for staff can be bought, and this just says we comply with those.
The only other one I would call attention to, on 705.1, the bidding procedures, we had a conversation around the specific amount.
Oh, yeah.
And the Department of, I'm just reading from the minutes, and then Chris, you can expand on it, but the Department of Education requires that we list an amount. Formerly, we had it at 25,000, but that amount is being increased to 150,000, which is consistent with federal guidance. And I don't know if you want to comment on the reason we did that. Is a lot of it had to do with some technology purchases, and I don't know if Dr. Vincent or Chris, if one of you wanted to comment on that, but Stephen had made a comment about that when we were discussing it.
So in the policy itself, it's split between regular bidding procedures and nutrition. Again, nutrition is very specific to federal law. There's micro purchases, there's formal purchases, there's limits. The state has always said that if you didn't put the federal law in there for nutrition, that it will revert back to whatever the district's policy is. And at the time we originally did these, it was 25,000. So we put the federal language in there for nutrition because we didn't want our formal bidding, which is 150,000 in the federal statute, to become 25,000. So when we were looking at this, it's getting to the point where, especially like on some of the larger technology purchases, that $25,000 doesn't buy many Chromebooks. And a lot of times there's only one source for those, they're one source purchases. So we thought it made sense just to match our district bidding amount to the federal requirement of $150,000. So that's what we're recommending.
And Chris, let me see, 710.1, school nutrition program, that's that refers to free and reduced, what we call free and reduced lunch, right?
Actually, I think the one that we had, that we wanted to point out to the board was that all of these are in regards to the nutrition program. Yes. So there are various policies in regards to different things that we're required to have in policy for the federal National School Lunch and Breakfast Program. The other one we wanted to call attention to was 710.4, which is the meal and snack charges. And this was a policy that really we had it already, but it became required when the negative school lunches really became an issue in Iowa, and then the statute changed and how we handle those. So at the time we did this, the one unique thing within this policy that is unique to Ames is that the board has to reconsider without it being pulled up, I can't remember, is it 2 meetings, Elisa, I think?
It is. Yep,
2
I think
meetings
so.
if the negative balances go above 70,000.
Mhm.
At the time this policy was written, we had been as high as $98,000 of negative lunch balances. Right now on our books, we're at negative 400. I still have about $29,000 at collections, because that was one of the things that we had to prove to the state that we were actively trying to collect. And we haven't sent to collection in 4 or 5 years now. But we have to carry those. They're not in Infinite Campus, but we have to carry them on a subsidiary ledger until we can write those off. The circumstances have changed significantly since this policy. Now, whether we want to change that or not, I do think that if that happened and let's say next year when the seamless summer option goes away, which we believe it's going to, and we'll go back to the regular National School Lunch and Breakfast where everyone is charged based on their eligibility. If those balances start going up, once we called attention to that, we brought it to the board level, that's when we started getting donations to help bring some of those down. So it's not a terrible thing to have in policy, but we did want to bring that to your attention.
So we did, if you look at the policy, we left it in there that is being proposed. But certainly if you wanted to go a different route, we could consider that, so.
It's just interesting that it took a pandemic for the federal government to realize that, in fact, we could feed all of our children for free. It's mind-boggling. They were thinking that we might not again, although we can.
Mhm.
It seems odd. But it made me, and I don't know if it's related to this, but it made me think about how are we calculating our free and reduced? Because that's a data point for us, right?
So we still encouraged parents to fill out free and reduced applications, because there's 2 ways that people become eligible for free or reduced meals. Our biggest one is direct certification. The Department of Human Services directly certifies through the Department of Education to us those students that they have already vetted their income eligibility and told us they're either free or reduced. So that's where most of ours comes through. For those, we still require the fee waiver, because a parent still has a right, regardless of their status, to ask to have their fees waived or not. But if you're not directly certified and you qualify for free and reduced, we still encourage you to fill out that application so that you could have your fees waived. So will I say the applications are as high as they have in the past? Probably not, but we still encouraged, at least those that were concerned about their fees, we encouraged them to get those applications in. But I will say that more and more of it is, especially, so it used to be direct certification was only on free. DHS only did free students. Now they're doing reduced students. They're not only doing free and reduced, they're doing free on Medicaid and free on some of the other types of qualifications. So I believe more and more will have less and less paper applications.
Chris, I just have 2 questions. So I couldn't hear what you said to Director Colton. What is the current balance?
On our books in Infinite Campus, I just looked the other day, it was in it, because we had an oral comment in our audit about some accounts over And I knew that wasn't right because I knew we had gotten some donations and we had had, so especially parents like donating their senior money. We have negative $400 when I checked it last week.
So that means there is no school lunch debt, or am I misunderstanding?
We have accounts that equal negative $400.
So $400 of debt.
Yes,
Okay, so we have $400 of
on
debt.
our books.
Okay.
And we have
The opposite.
29,000 at collections.
Okay, it's so, because I remember going to the meeting that this policy came out of. It was I was a candidate, and it was the first policy meeting I'd ever been to, and it was over here, but that's neither here nor there. I guess I'm curious, because I remember how contentious this was, right? And so I was not at this meeting, and I apologize, I was not able to make this meeting, but I was surprised to see that the language came out in the current policy about students who qualify for free meals shall never be denied a reimbursable meal or snack, on and on. I wondered if someone could tell me why that language was taken out.
It wasn't taken out. It's still in there, right?
I don't see it. Can you show me where it is?
Can you pull the policy up, meal and snack charges, Eric? Oh, you know what? I think it's in the other policy, actually. I think it's in the,
Procurement.
I think it's in the free and reduced cost meals eligibility.
0.2?
Yeah.
710.2.
So one's dealing with debt and one's dealing with, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to pull the agenda up. We did not, the language did not get taken out in the policy. The policy is exactly the same as it was.
Well, I checked it. It's not there either.
Okay, let me look real quick.
But I could be missing it.
That is state law. So even if we took it out, we couldn't change it because state law says that no child will be denied a reimbursable meal.
Do we want to bring this in?
I think we're gonna need to pull this one. I'm not seeing it either, and it should not. All I did was copy and paste from the policy, so I did not delete anything. So I'm gonna have to look and see what happened.
Thanks, Chris.
But it would be in 710.4, so that's the one we'll need to pull.
Okay, thanks. Well, I was like, maybe they moved it to the administrative rules. I just wasn't sure. Thank you.
Nope.
All right, thank you for that update. Are there any other questions from the board on the policies for discussion?
The only thing I was going to say is we do have a policy committee meeting on Thursday, so possibly you could bring it to us, the policy committee, and we could bring it back for action.
Yep.
Pending our discussion Thursday at noon.
Okay, just a thought. Perfect.
And just real quick, I see that the equity committee is on their TBD. I've been thinking about it. I don't think I'm going to call another one. They take forever to schedule, and really all we've been doing is it's too late to kind of do anything, you know. And so what we've been doing is putting information into a Google Doc, and I just feel like I don't feel like I need to convene another meeting, but if you all would like that, I will do that. But I don't feel like we need to have a meeting.
I know Dr. Jones isn't here, so we can maybe touch base with him as well and see what his thoughts are, but
Yeah.
okay.
Thanks.
And just to be clear for the public, Director Bankin just means, well, she is still a director.
I'm still the chair, yeah.
Only for a couple more weeks.
That's right.
All right. Are there any comments from the public on the policies for discussion?
Director Benkin, I just looked up our current policy and that language is in there, so good catch. I did, that was not an intent to take it out.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
All right, we will move on to our teaching and learning update. And we have the ESSER 3 follow-up about SciOp professional learning. And we'll turn it over to Erin Miller.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm happy to be here this evening to give you an update about some professional learning plans we have at the secondary level here. As you may remember, the ESSER 3 committee met over the summer and made some recommendations about different kinds of action they would like to see us take in order to help all of our students, including those that were specifically targeted with the data that team looked at. One of the groups that the team discussed were secondary English learners. That was a group that showed in the data that we weren't serving them very well over the last couple of years, longer than that, but specifically that team looked at the last couple of years. So they made some recommendations, one, to focus on that group, and two, to think about not only interventionists, but also to think about how we could engage our staff and professional learning with these funds so that the strategies lasted beyond the length of the funds. And then also we wanted to look at research-based strategies for our students. So we consulted with our English learner coordinator, Shaylee Santiago, who's with me tonight, and she made some recommendations about different ways that we could move forward. And one of those recommendations was to engage in some professional learning around SciOp, which is a model of instructional practice. It stands for Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol. And you'll see up there that there are 3 authors who originally founded this work, I think in the 2000, I think we were talking, yes. And one of them is from Ames, interestingly enough. Grew up in Ames, so anyway. So it really centers the strategies in there around culturally responsive teaching and learning to honor the knowledge that students come with and to think about how can we really focus on engaging the funds of knowledge they have in order to help them engage with our content. The other thing about SciOp as a model of learning is that it does have some empirically validated research with it. And you'll find a link to the overview of one of the research practices. It was from a study in Illinois where the students, after their teachers engaged in this way of designing learning, did show some statistically significant increases on their standardized test scores. So it links to that. So I just wanted to briefly overview with you the 8 big components. I know in the original agenda you had the 8 components and the 30 features. So I'll just talk through the high level components, but the features are there if you want to dig in. It starts really with lesson preparation and asking teachers to think about and being very specific about what kinds of lessons and learning objectives they have. So thinking about content and language objectives and thinking about what background knowledge do students already have, and if there are any additional pieces they need to fill in, what are those pieces? Trying to make the lessons more comprehensible to our students. So thinking about, again, maybe home language and where they are in their language development. And I guess that brings me, I forgot to say in the beginning that these strategies are really designed for non-sheltered classes. So not the language development classes, but our content area classes, to make those classes like math and science and social studies more easily accessible to our English learners. Okay, so that's for everybody. Thanks. I was thinking about that. It doesn't make sense if it's just the other way. So comprehensible input, really thinking about different scaffolding strategies that we can use. That might include different graphic organizers. So visually, how do we represent things? Sometimes that's helpful as well. There's different strategies, especially centered around what kinds of questioning and prompts are teachers giving to students, thinking about the ways in which we ask students to interact. So is it they're just listening the whole time, or is it we're having a conversation and I'm being asked to use academic language in the classroom? Practice and application, really making sure that students have a lot of time to dig in and try and do, right? So very active learning, learner-centered environment. How we deliver the lesson as the teacher in the room, what moves do we make, and then really focusing on, did the students meet the goal that we set? What feedback do I need to get them? And then it really is cyclical, and then it launches right back into lesson preparation. So based on my assessment, what do I need to do next? So it just kind of goes around in a cycle. So those are the big components of the model. Thinking about how we're going to train that then, usually they ask you to set aside 3 days and to get subs for a group of 30 teachers for 3 days so they can really dive deep. And we said, gosh, we're not going to be able to pull that off very well. Could we brainstorm with you about some other options? And they said, sure. So what we talked about was having their trainers come out and still doing small groups. So we're going to have 3 trainers come out so we can get the more feedback to our teachers from the actual trainers. But we'll do them on the remaining PD days that we have. So we have them about once a month, as you know. And we'll break it into 3-hour chunks. And so what's really lovely about that, and what the SIOP trainers were excited about, is that teachers will be able to do a little bit of learning, and then they'll try some things and they'll reflect on how it went, and they'll come back and learn a little bit more about a different component. So we'll have that built throughout the year in order to get through the 8 components of SIOP training. So that is, we started at the high school, but because we're bringing the trainers out, it made a lot of sense in the middle school. They were excited about it. And so we'll have both buildings. The trainers will be in the morning at one building, in the afternoon at the other building. We've also looked at a train-the-trainer model, because one question is always, how do you sustain it? Then we can't pay probably for SIOP trainers every year. So over the summer, we're in the works to have a group of administrators and teacher leaders, so coordinators, instructional coaches, possibly some other folks trained as a train-the-trainer for SIOP, so that we can continue things along. Then we're also looking at a plan potentially to do some elementary teacher training, perhaps with train-the-trainer, although the SIOP team also offers some virtual hybrid kinds of things that we could look at into next year that may fit our needs. Anyway, so that's a little bit about what SIOP is and how we plan to engage teachers in learning this year. And Shaylee and I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. I'm excited about this. Can I kind of give you a scenario so you kind of, just so I can understand like what the students will experience? So let's say we have a high school student that is English learner. Let's say it's me, which I was. So let's say it's a 16-year-old that is at grade level in their native language. And how will this affect their learning? How exactly, what it will experience? They will go to math and then they will experience this other thing. How can you walk me through that experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this is, they're still going to go to math. What we're trying to do is help the math teacher have better strategies to help, like if it were me, to help Aaron engage in that learning, right? So I might be sitting in a math class, if I could access the language, I would understand the concepts of math because I'm at grade level in math. But the language is getting in my way. So this is trying to help the math teachers think through what strategies would be best in order to help make the English language a little bit more comprehensible or a little bit easier to navigate. So those might be things like different visual representations in math. It might be things like setting a language objective, like I'm gonna teach the word algorithm. And then once I teach the word algorithm, you're like, oh yeah, I know what that is. And so that just teaching the language intentionally, the English academic language very intentionally is part of it too. So it's not that so this actually, one of the interesting things is that some of the research is starting to be expanded beyond English learners because the strategies are great for anybody, especially students who maybe struggle in that content area because they're really talking about even like sentence frames. So maybe I'm a little nervous about participating in class because my reading and writing is higher than my speaking and listening. But if I had a sentence frame where the teacher started the sentence for me, then that would be easier for me to participate, right? In a variety of things. So this might also help support students with dyslexia or a variety of things, right? If we're thinking about that particular strategy of using sentence frames. And so it's really interesting how I think in districts that have used this. So one of our new high school associate principals came from a district that used this, his high school in Utah, was saying how powerful it was to help support teachers as they're designing lessons and just giving them more tools in their toolbox to think about.
And for a second scenario, and you probably answer it, but a bit of a more complex scenario in the sense that this student is in let's say 11th grade or 10th grade, but they're in their native language, they're at a 5th, 6th grade level. How does this help that particular case?
Yeah, so I think by breaking it down, so again, these strategies for just kind of chunking things, really identifying specific strategies for identifying like misunderstandings or gaps in background knowledge, those sorts of things, not gaps in background knowledge, but different background knowledge that hasn't been built yet, right? So these strategies should help identify what is missing and how to help students access the grade level context. I think one of the other things I was reading about, I can let you answer some of these questions too, I apologize. But it was interesting to think about, like, Shaylee can talk a little bit more about the ALPA 21 breaks down like student strengths areas in reading, writing, speaking, listening. So as a high school English teacher, I had a student that was really high in speaking and listening, but not as accomplished yet in English and reading and writing. So thinking about adapting assignments into more of a speech, right, rather than asking somebody to write a paper about something to demonstrate their knowledge might be one of those strategies where we can help students to really show us what they know and can do.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm going to thank you for this. I really like the idea of this. I can tell you put a lot of thought into it, so thank you. You answered a lot of my questions. I was like, oh, check. That's good. But I do have just for some clarity, and I want to tread very carefully because I don't understand this, right? This is really beyond my competency. I don't know how this stuff works. So it's just the questions are really just trying to help me better understand how this works. So when you think about the training, right? Because I heard you say 30 subs and I'm like, oh, where are you going to get 30 subs? And so you devised a strategy over 3 existing PD days to get this done, right?
It'll take the rest of the year. So every month from now until the end of the year.
For the training.
A different component.
For the training.
Yep.
But then let's say the next year, once the teachers are doing it, will they still need time during the month to tweak their lesson plans?
Yeah, so that's a great question. One of the things that we haven't finished totally developing the plan for, but the SIOP team really encourages, is that you continue your partnership with them over the course of a few years so they can go on learning walks. Part of the training for Train the Trainers with the administrators is so they know what they're looking for and they know how to give feedback to teachers so that they can say, hey, this was, or have those coaching conversations and making sure our learning leads are part of it. So really making sure everybody understands and can work together. Absolutely, we'll need to keep learning about it. And so having time, so even throughout next year, like you said, to do some reflection pieces. There's some learning that goes really deep into those individual features that they recommend after you do the initial overview. So we could do, I think, probably learning about SIOP for an indefinite amount of time to keep working on it.
But I guess my concern is I don't have a sense that the staffing shortages we have now will be remedied next year.
Right.
I know, well, I've heard teachers saying I'm losing my planning period because I have to go do this or that or whatever. And so I'm wondering, how are you planning to make sure that doesn't happen, right? I mean, that's that kind of implementation piece I'm worried about.
So that's kind of why we made that partnership, because we knew we couldn't do sub days for training. So we are going to have to do it through our existing PD structures.
Okay.
And that's part of the train the trainer model. So we're not pulling any subs. I maybe said that and that was confusing. I didn't mean to be. But if you Google SIOP training, a lot of it's like the 3-day session. And I wanted to kind of clarify that we're not doing that.
Okay.
But so we're doing it through our existing days. And then also next year we would do it that way. And that's the train the trainer would be a full week, but we would do that in the summer when there aren't students in the building.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then in terms of sustainability, and new people coming in who wouldn't be in this training, then that's what the trainer will do, is be able to get these new people kind of up to speed.
Right.
And then I don't even know if this is a good question, but I'm wondering well, the next question, I don't know if it's a good question, this one is, I'm wondering how you're going to be measuring efficacy and like, what are the metrics of accountability?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of Shaylee was telling me when this was originally designed, it was designed as an observation protocol, right? For people to walk in and see what was going on in classrooms. And so we can use this too. So I think the nice thing about the high school, middle school plan is we can do it in chunks, right? So one of the first things teachers learn about is talking about language and content objectives with students. And so we'll be able to go in and support them in do we have these things, right? So we can see how that rolls out in real time. As you know, implementation is always a messy business and it usually takes a while. So we don't know that this will be the strategy that we'll see, that we'll be able to say there was growth from fall to spring MAP scores and reading, and we're gonna say that it was due to SIOP. That's unlikely to be the case. But hopefully over time, we would be able to see those standardized test scores for our English learners meet the level of their peers.
Okay. And at what point will you know it's not?
That's a great question. I don't know. I would have to do more digging. My guess is they usually say for programs like this that you need about 3 years of implementation before you really start to see a significant change. And so I think that is one benchmark. But I would hate to say that if we don't see any progress with our students, that we're just going to wait and hope. That's not a good strategy.
I'll just add that we also have English language proficiency data, so our ELPA assessment. So tracking growth on ELPA would be another point we would look at, and that's something we already track every year.
Okay. And the last question that I'm not sure about this, and so, please correct me if it's a dumb question. I'm wondering how this aligns with the SEL curriculum.
This isn't a curriculum. So the teachers will still teach to their standards and their same materials. This is tweaking how we deliver the instruction, not what we're teaching.
Okay.
And so this will happen during like the regular class time. So the SEL strategies could be overlaid. I haven't gotten through the ruler training enough to know exactly we need to tweak the ruler pieces in order to match sort of the SIOP delivery model. I'm not sure.
Because they sound like they would be consistent, but you're saying there are potentials where they could be in conflict.
I don't know. So if you're designing a lesson from ruler right around a social emotional topic, I don't know if they embed content language objectives, for example. So if we were talking about I don't know, I was trying to, if we did a lesson on bullying and harassment, like a language objective might be around the word bullying or the word harassment. We might have to embed that, and I don't know. It might already be there. I just don't know.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I had one question that's kind of a follow-up to something that Director Bacon asked, and it's this idea of onboarding new staff and how they get trained. Because we hear the train the trainer, and this has come up in other areas with the critical consciousness training and things. How does that work as a new teacher? Do they have like an intensive X number of days where the building trainers would train them on these topics, or what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's something we need to keep getting better at. So we have new staff right now for 3 days, and we split that between district level kind of trainings and building level practical. What do I do? Kids are coming in a couple days sort of thing. And so we really kind of think about our mentoring induction program for brand new teachers is 2 years. And so I know that everything feels really immediate. So I think one of the things is how do we balance over 2 years that training? As we know, especially with elementary teachers, we have foundations training, we do means of study training, we have math curriculum training, that everything is immediate. And so it really relies on the support of those building level folks, like the learning leads and their mentors, to support as we go. This year we tried doing some workshops around foundations and reading means of study in a couple of evenings using some teacher professional development money to pay them to come in extra evenings. They signed up, it was a volunteer thing. But I Karen Tunsvik is one of the teaching and learning coordinators, and she ran those sessions around those curricular programs and got good feedback. Like this was helpful. It was in the fall, so we got kids in the door, so we got over that initial, fire hose of information. And then we had some space to think about what is a good reading workshop, what are best practices around foundations and implementation. So this might be, I think there's lots of avenues to explore, maybe is the answer to the question, but I think you have to think about it longer than just those 3 days because there's so much at the beginning of your first year of teaching.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
One question or clarification I had is, so you talked about the PD days the rest of the year, but how many teachers, what's the scope? Like, is this every teacher, some percentage of teachers? What's that like?
Almost everybody. So we can train 90 teachers at the high school. And I think we have about 90 teachers. So it's going to work out really pretty well. We may not train a couple of folks like, I think on the high school staff list, when I saw it was at 91, it included like a juvenile court liaison and a couple of other folks that maybe wouldn't be designing lessons. So we should be able to train every teacher that designs lessons at the high school and the same at the middle school. So we'll break them up into 3 groups and be able to do it. That's why we went out to the 3rd trainer. So we get everybody.
And then a follow-up I had to Director Binkin's question. One thing that I really liked about how we talked about some of the ESSER stuff was this idea of not only using things that are research-based, but then being able to measure and see how the impact is. I understand that the quantitative data of the impact of this might be a couple of years out, but I encourage you to think about, from the board perspective, we want to be able to see some of that, like quarterly or every 6 months, what are the programs being done? Is it impacting? I don't know if there's maybe qualitative methods for like asking the teachers, hey, does this seem to be useful? Or you using it? I'm not suggesting anything here so much as I think that's something coming out of that ESSER discussion we'd like to be able to see more of in these type of reports is, a year from now, what do we know about how this training went and the impact it's having? So any ways you can think of for that would be useful, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think after each one of those sessions, thinking about getting some feedback from teachers, not only about what they liked about the session, but what do they see as potential roadblocks or things that they need more support with. And then those walkthroughs around those components that they're learning, how's that going? I think all of those things are great.
Thank you.
I don't actually have a question. I have a comment. This makes me really happy. And you said something I want to make sure is repeated. Because you said that this will help all students at some level to see and learn content differently.
Yeah.
Because even English speakers sometimes have trouble learning English. And so I think anytime you give teachers tools to say things the same but in a different way, you're helping all students. So I'm thrilled this is going to help our English learning students. I'm thrilled it's going to help other students who have the same types of issues. And it's going to give teachers the tools that they might need to help explain the same things just a little differently. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, then we will, thank you for that update. And we will take any comments or questions from the public on our teaching and learning update. And it looks like we have one in our Zoom call. We have Angela Shaw. You've been given permission to speak.
Hello, everybody. My name is Angela Shaw. I live at 5411 Tennessee Street, and I'm speaking on behalf of Ames Youth and School Action Team, ASAT, and we are a nonpartisan group of concerned citizens whose goal is to improve educational opportunities. It was great to hear about the SIOP program, but this program is not new. After talking to multiple students, this program has been tried within the Ames Community School District multiple times over the past 10 years. The program has failed for 3 main reasons. The biggest reason is there was a lack of time for teachers to utilize this program in their day-to-day learning planning. The number 2 reason was lack of accountability. And the 3rd reason was lack of sustainability within the training program. ASAT asked the board, does this 150,000 budget include a budget for substitute teachers so that the classroom teachers have time to collaborate and do needed work to update their curriculum and their instruction? Or what is the strategy in place for the teachers after the initial training so that they can keep up with their learning and their modules for their students? The second one that's been brought up multiple times is measurable matrix to determine if this program is working. In the past, they have not had matrix to show that it was working, or who and how it's going to be monitored. The last question we would ask the board is, how does this initiative fall within the greater ESSER 2 and 3 complete plan? English learners is just one population that was identified. At the last board meeting, we heard from the homeless liaison, but there was no plans detailed about ESSER funds being used. Hearing that all of the rest of the PD trainings are going to be dedicated to this one training, what about the other populations that were identified by the school district for ESSER 2 and 3 funds? How are those populations also going to be served? Number one, to prevent the educational and emotional and social emotional gaps, but also to make a change. We want to see measurable changes in the gap that we see within the school district. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Angela. Any other comments from the public on the teaching and learning update? All right, then we will move on to our staffing update. And Kristen Johnson.
All right, does it work? Thank you so much for the opportunity to respond to one of the information pieces that we had requested, that had been requested of us at the last meeting. Eric, would you please? So I created a graph. We looked at this is just the EA numbers as of the week that the request had been made. And what I did in order to try to do a comparison was compare the total number or the number of hires for the last 3 years or the last 2 years plus this year. So you can see that the number of hires 2 years ago for the whole year was quite a bit higher than last year. And then you can see that this year, up until the incentive program, the number of hires was lower. And then after the incentive program was put into place, we have hired quite a few, like more than double since then. And so I can't really say whether there's a causation, because I think that was your question, potentially a correlation. I would say that we also have lost, it says, I think 3 there. We've had a couple more resign since then. So we've had, I think, 5 or 6 resign since the incentive program was put into place. So I don't know whether or not the incentive part or the retention incentive is working yet. And the other thing is those numbers, it's kind of hard to tell why there's such a big disparity. I don't know if it's all COVID between 2 years ago and last year, or whether or not there was a higher number of EAs that resigned before 2 years ago, before we had to do all that hiring. We do have a pretty constant turnover. There are a few that have been there for a very long time, but I was just looking at the list of, I think we have like 137 EAs working for us right now, and the vast majority have been with us for less than 2 years. And as far as the custodians, we hired 2 prior to the incentive being put into place. We've hired 3 since then, and also 2 have resigned since the beginning of the year. Again, that's not just custodians, it's also 1 maintenance person we hired.
So I have a question, because I want to make sure I'm clear. This is hires only, so this is not looking at total EAs, because if one would look at, at first when I looked at this, I thought, why was there such a change in total number? It is not. Can you, do you have the, you said 137 EAs now?
We have 137 EAs now, yes.
At our, so what would our number have been? I'm sure it changed throughout the year last year, but what would have been our range? last year and the year before, do you know?
No, I don't have that
Okay.
information. It's been, I wanted to create a circle graph that showed, the fill rate basically for years of comparison. And we didn't have, our needs change from year to year, depending on what our needs are for special ed EAs.
Sure.
And so it's really difficult we don't have really a tracking way to know what our needs are versus how they're filled from year to year. So that's something that I'm working on figuring out a systematic way to be able to track and compare that data.
Are we fully staffed now with EAs or are you still hiring?
No, we're not. We're still very low, especially in the middle school and high school. Our elementaries are pretty well staffed. I think maybe one or two, they could use one or two more.
So I'm curious, so thank you for this. This was helpful. I mean, I guess I want to ask, are you happy with it? Do you think it's working?
I don't know if it's working or if it's just, I think we may be getting some folks who otherwise may not have looked at it, but then they get here and realize it's not for them because it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
I don't think I could be an EA. So I don't know if it's better to have somebody try and leave or whether it's better to just have it open and try to cover for them.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of related to my next question is I'm wondering who are these people, right? Like are you, because Ames has this turnover, right? So is it just that are these new, where do you keep finding all these new people, I guess is what I'm asking? Or do you have people who do it for a little bit and they don't, then they come back or whatever? So I mean, like that's what I'm asking. Sorry.
We have had a few of that, of that example, exactly. Some folks who were here a year ago, 2 years ago, they left and now they've come back. We have some who have moved into town, some, that's really, I don't have a good sense of where they're all coming from. But I do believe that you're correct that with the university, for example, and we get a lot of folks who are here with their families or we have students as well. So we've been trying to recruit students at Iowa State. And we can get them maybe for one semester because it fits in their schedule. And then the next semester, it doesn't fit for them to be able to come to school every day during the hours that we need them. And so then we lose them. So, I mean, it's going to be the nature of a community like this in some sense, because the available and the people who are there aren't always available consistently.
Thank you for this. Appreciate it.
How are we as far as hiring in general across the district? Like, I know you've had trouble filling some other positions in the past as well. But what's your feel there? I mean, is it similar to the national numbers where it's just hard to find people right now, or?
I would say that when I talked with with HR directors at other UEN districts, I think we're in as good or better shape than a lot of them. I know there's one UEN district who was unable to fill 20 teaching positions, and we had 5 that we were unable to fill. I know one other district had, like, I think it was Cedar Rapids or Cedar Falls I think it was Cedar Rapids had 200 that they needed to fill, all up with between, associates and teachers. So we are in better shape than a lot of the other districts.
So just best guess, because you might not have this number in front of you, but how many EAs are we still short? And maybe the same thing for teachers and administrators. Like, do you know roughly?
We have added an administrator at the high school. So we were fully filled there. Teachers, we were short 5 that we wanted to fill, that we're not able to fill. We're looking for an additional one, somebody who is being asked is asking to be released from his contract mid-year. And we need to fill that before we can release them. So that's what I know about that. For EAs, I think we're in better shape than we were, but I didn't look at that exact number in terms of what was still open yet.
Do you know, is like on the order of a handful, like under 5, or is it
No, it's
like
more than
10 or
5.
20, or?
It's more than 5. I could look at it real quick and maybe answer that later. I have a spreadsheet that I can.
Yeah, or a follow-up later would be fine. I'd just be interested to know raw numbers, like how much short are we from where we'd like to be? Thank you.
Thank you for following up with that. We appreciate it. All right. Are there any comments from the public on our staffing update? And seeing none, I will go ahead and open our public forum and read our statement on public comments. Residents of the district, students attending the district, parents or guardians of students attending the district, and district staff members may address the board about any topic relevant to the district, whether on the current agenda or not. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speaker participation is limited to 3 minutes once per item. The views and opinions of citizens addressing the board do not necessarily reflect those of the board, district administration, or staff. Speakers are to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees, students, or their performance. Student speakers will state their name and school. Others will state their name and address. And in the room tonight, we have Christopher Kasak.
Hello, Christopher Kasak, 5616 Maryland Street. So after the last meeting, I went home to go make dinner for my kids. It was Columbus Day, and I asked my kids, hey, did you do anything special in school during 6th and 7th grade? And my daughter was like, what's today? And I was like, oh, you guys didn't learn any, new things, good or bad, about, the holiday? And she's like, what holiday is it? And she's like, oh, some of the teachers wrote it on their board. It's National Coming Out Day, which I found a little ridiculous just because there's a day for every day, but that's Columbus Day. Whether you agree with Columbus or not, whether you like him or not, it's good to get the history, good and bad, on those topics. Today is National Pumpkin Day, and I don't see anyone writing about pumpkins on the board. Tomorrow is National Financial Crime Fighter Day. I don't see any teachers writing about the brave financial crime fighters that are working on a daily basis. And that's because that's silly. That's not needed in school because the brave winter squash of pumpkin isn't relevant. They could be learning better stuff. Like I said on the last one, my son can tell you, and he learned this in a core class, what a pansexual is, what an asexual is, what a transsexual is. And I feel like they probably could be doing something a little bit more beneficial to get ahead in the world. They're going to learn about all this stuff in college. These are 6th and 7th graders. We need to stop this sexualization of our children. It's pushed from everywhere. It's pushed from media. It's pushed now in the schools. And these are kids that were in elementary school 6 months ago. Like, I don't think it's appropriate. I would never push my values. It has nothing to do with heterosexual or homosexual or anything in between. It has to do with kids being able to learn and get ahead in life. And I really don't see how that helps them get ahead in life. Can't even talk about that kind of stuff at work because it's a taboo subject, and that's fine. And I don't care what consenting adults do in their room. I don't judge anyone for it. And honestly, I don't really care. But the problem comes is when we're taking young kids and it's almost an indoctrination of sorts into these beliefs. I would never push my beliefs on other parents' children. If there was a guy rolling down the street in a van, stopped your little child, your little 5th, 6th, 7th grader, started talking to him about sexual activities, no matter what it was, or anything above the sort, what would you do? Probably grab him by his neck and go to the police, okay? I'm not saying that the teachers are rolling down the street in a van, but I feel we already put enough complex issues on these children, like we do, stuff that adults have trouble even comprehending. This should be left to the discretion of the parents to do it, instead of constantly pushing it left and right in schools and everywhere else. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. Do we have anyone in our virtual audience who would like to speak as part of the public forum? All right, seeing none, I will close the public forum and move on to our consent items. And I will entertain a motion, but I do want to advise you all that we need to pull the American University contract and the University of Iowa contract. Those are still in the process of going through some updates after discussions with legal and will be brought to the next meeting. So if you could just have the motion include that, please.
I move approval of the consent agenda as presented and adjusted by President Shields Cook.
Second.
Moved by Franzen, seconded by Beerbaum, and Superintendent Vincent.
Once again, we have a list of donors that we'd like to acknowledge and thank them. Central Iowa Juvenile Detention Center has provided a gift to the district, as has Lutheran Church of Hope, and also Good Neighbor Emergency Assistance and Luther Church of Hope. And they're mostly contributions of food and winter clothing and gas vouchers, and we very much appreciate their generosity.
Thank you. It was moved by Franzen, seconded by Beerbaum. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Moving on to our policies for action, and I will entertain a motion.
I move we approve the policies as presented.
Second. Moved by Bankin, seconded by Colton. Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. New high school construction project change orders.
I move the board approve the change orders for the new Ames High School construction project as presented.
Second.
Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Bankin. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Oh, aye. Sorry.
Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. And we will move on to our board and staff items. I will start with just a quick update about our superintendent search process. We had over 1,100 community members, parents, teachers, and students participate in the survey that the search firm sent out. And we had well over 100 community members participate in the focus group interviews that they conducted. We will have a work session tomorrow evening with the search firm here at 6:30. That will be open to the public, but it will not be broadcast via Zoom. And then we will enter a little bit of a quiet period while they do their recruitment phase until it comes time to do interviews a little bit closer to January. Any other items from the board?
I want to share one thing. We were invited last week to help out with the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade things at the middle school to be referees, and you can all have your judgment on how well we may have done in that capacity. But what I did want to share is I had the opportunity to be there on Friday with the 8th grade students, and I had somebody comment to me, darn it, this is what I wish everybody in our community could see. The kids were all engaged, yelling and cheering for the different teams that played that represented the homerooms, and then the teachers played against the students. And I just want to commend our middle school staff because it was my understanding is it was a part of the celebration for doing a good job as a student body. And so I want to commend them for providing that opportunity for all of those kids to be a part of that fun experience.
I just want to share that October 11th is also Indigenous Peoples Day for anybody who celebrates that. I also want to say that, in my time on the board in the 4 years, I've gotten to know this community in such interesting ways. And it's been interesting to me to see the way our community has conversations around identities, vulnerable populations. And as a Black person, I've noticed that people won't say things to me that are overtly racist, but that people in this community sometimes don't mind saying things that are overtly homophobic or transphobic or, that hurt other people. And I'm sorry that we as a board have to experience that. I'm sorry that our community has to experience that. we all have to find a way to move forward in this community together. And, when you come asking for respect, I think it's important to be aware of the ways in which you give or don't give respect. So, hope you all have a good night.
Yeah, I wanted to say something as well. I'm leaving, right? I'm on my way out. But I have said it before, and I will say it again as I leave this dais. Trans affirming work and queer affirming work is life-saving work. And I applaud our teachers, our staff for engaging in that important and crucial work. Thank you.
Thank you both for those comments, and Director Franzen for sharing about the middle school. Appreciate those. All right, Superintendent Vincent, we'll turn it to you.
Sure. We had the pleasure of hosting the Department of Ed one more time as they continue to collect information about our district, and we're hopeful that they will be able to meet their intended timeline of providing feedback to us first part of November. Haven't heard any difference, so that should be information we have very soon. As you noted in Director Stinsland's report this evening, we have that first really critical piece of information that we need to start the budget planning. And you also noticed what I'm describing as a pinch point for our district, in that coming off the budget guarantee, we're going to have to be very clear about our priorities and where we choose to put our resources, as we hope to also be able to honor the good work of the employees in the district with some sort of cost of living increase. And I don't know the numbers you're looking at. I'm seeing pretty consistently in the Midwest that our cost of living this year is likely up in the 5+% range. So we have some issues there to reconcile. So it's work that needs to begin now in order to bring those pieces into a place where we all can live with them. But the final thing I would comment on, we're continuing to make some adjustments in the high school. Many of the directors have been spending quite a bit of time there in different support roles. And it's kind of, as you stated, with the middle school experience, I wish folks could see all the moments that we don't capture on video that are going so very well. And at the same time, acknowledging we are having to reteach and maybe teach for the first time some ways of doing things that we've missed for a couple of years through this pandemic. And also, I think we have to acknowledge we have not yet found adequate resources or supports to work on an individualized basis. And I think that is our key to our future, is thinking about each student and their family and their aspirations and what would it take from us so that we really can see that progress regardless of the circumstance. But we're well into that work and working on a way to try to show that to not only the board, but the whole community. So keep asking for it. We're not quite ready to say, here's where we are at this moment, but probably in November, we will be able to say, here's what we've added so far, here's what's working, here's what we've tried and already had to adjust to a new iteration. Just a very minor part of that this morning, we had some work done with our buildings and grounds staff over the weekend with trying to redirect the safety issues with the flow of traffic. We have a really challenging traffic pattern there. I would say today showed that was an improvement. We probably, again, aren't done with that, but many thanks to lots of hands and ideas and cooperation with the city and starting to that shift that I think we were getting kids to and from school in a little bit safer way. And again, still acknowledging it's not perfect. We have a long ways to go. But with that, I know we have one more meeting, but we can do this more than once. Just want to acknowledge the great work. Anytime board members give of the service, I don't know that people realize how much time you all give, how many hours. I don't know if you've ever actually taken the time to try to tally it, but it is volunteer service, and we couldn't do it without the community. So want to acknowledge our directors that will be going off soon, and we'll do that more formally in our next meeting. But let this be the first to say, thank you so much. It is truly a gift to the community.
All right, couldn't agree with that more. Okay. I lost my spot on the agenda here. Moving on to our board planning calendar. As I mentioned, we have our work session tomorrow evening at 6:30. And then our next regular meeting will be November 8th. And that will be with the currently seated board, because I can't remember the official.
Because the canvas isn't until November 15th. It's the second Monday after the election, and we can't seat the board until after the canvas.
So even though the election will have happened, we'll have the current board in place for the November 8th meeting, and then November 2nd will be our organizational meeting where the new members will be seated.
And the existing board does need to come to the 22nd as well.
Only half of the meeting.
Very short piece.
Don't be swaying us.
Any other questions or comments on the board planning calendar? And I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Bankin. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0.